I know I said I probably didn't want to work on this project in the cold, but dang it if the ADHD doesn't just I gotta work on something, dang it. Okay, we're in business. We may as well make our own self up, eh? That's right, onboard air. Well there, a good spark plug is all she needed to behave. Okay, I've got the supposedly 1941 Model B in the shop here, getting ready to steal the motor off of it, and probably some of the sheet metal, and well, maybe I don't want to cut the grill up. The C's, the pedestal that I left on it has a notch out there for where the bell crank that runs the steering for the tricycle front end goes there. So I'm gonna steal that motor anyway, and the radiator probably, and maybe the hood, but let it thaw out a little bit. I think I'm gonna keep the torque tube, and that'll let me keep the steering and everything with the tractor. I don't have to take as much apart, and it'll be easier to go back together when I find the right long-term powertrain for this. Like I say, I think this is just going to be to get me through this summer, a couple of years. I don't know. It's not going to hurt anything for the rest of this to sit for a couple of years. I think it needs a bearing in the rear somewhere anyway. I remember last time I was using it hard, it was making a lot of noise. But yeah, I think what I'll be doing tonight is just getting this old girl separated. Now some might ask, and that's fair, why would I take apart, what kind of hillbilly would take apart a perfectly good tractor, running and driving, just everything good on it, just to build up that junk one out front with the crap welder out of the weeds welded to it and old truck axle welded to it and all that stuff? Well, this one kind of needs to come apart anyway. It really, this is the first tractor, the real tractor that I've ever messed with. The first one I've owned, I bought this out of a barn in Ohio, and they had taken the cylinder head off of it some 20 years or so ago, before I had gotten it about 10 years ago. They'd taken the cylinder head off. They'd had it hot dipped, reworked, and new valves and everything. It looked great, or at least it used to before it sat on top of it, just wrapped up, not doing anything. Never got put back on it. And the cylinder sat open and ended up rusting up, and they couldn't be saved. So I bought another kit for it, and just the lower end was good. I measured everything and it was fine. So I just put new liners and pistons in it, and it was good to go. I love these wet sleeve engines, so I'm going to borrow it for a little bit, and while it's apart, it's time for a repaint. I had restored this one, I'll say, in kind of air quotes, because I used the cheapest of paints, and it's showing. It is really coming apart. It's been 10 years ago, and this tractor sat in the weather for a while in that time, but the factory paint looked good for at least 4 or 5 decades of probably the same treatment as sitting in the weeds. But another among those reasons is it's leaking coolant. I haven't actually, I've taken the sheet metal off, but I haven't even started draining the coolant yet. It's leaking that. The paint's bad, like I said. I mentioned the bearing, but one thing I didn't mention, I quoted this as a 41. I don't believe the 41, maybe I'm wrong, I could be wrong here, I don't believe the 41s would have had electric start, even as an option. But the serial number per the rear end, what does that say? 42. Oh man, I can't read that at all. 42 787, maybe something like that. I remember looking this up years ago, and it's 41, according to that serial number. But when I got it, the part here where the torque tube meets the transmission was a color change. So I think this old girl had a motor swap before, and they used that tube along with a clutch and all of that stuff. But so I don't really feel like I'm losing a whole lot by temporarily, like I said, taking this apart, doing all the sheet metal work, making that look better, doing the prep work right, probably fix that mess, and really restore this one. I don't know that I'll get that done before Gathering of the Orange in Wilmington at the Clinton County Corn Festival this year. But I'm kind of planning on having the loader tractor there in its stead. And, you know, there's the power plant for it. So, yeah, I'll quit John and get back after it. If you like no prep racing, then how do you feel about no prep welding? God, my vertical up is atrocious. That is not even remotely passable. Yep, she's about ready. So this is something a lot of people fail to recognize about internal combustion engines, especially gasoline internal combustion engines. See that little bubble on top of that cup plug? Little spot there, little bubble there, that's water. And that happens. That's okay. But the important thing is to run these engines, look at that, that's where it came from. You run this a little bit, it condensates up at the top, or when the temperature changes. Got in here in the shop, temperature changed. Motor warmed up a little bit. Condensation. It happens. You gotta run these things hard sometimes. And it's really better for them. You gotta pay attention to that oil. Maybe you do need to change it seasonally, right? You can't, if you're gonna let them sit, at least recognize the risk that, yes, you have condensation, you have a vent, you've got water getting in there if you live somewhere humid. So just, you know, think about that. That's why I was under the valve cover, by the way, was, you know, to lift it so that I could take it in half. So now I'm just scavenging the gasoline out of it, and then the back half here is going to go sit by the creek for a little bit. Probably get back to, you know, cleaning that up and painting it and whatnot at some point, but that's going to be a while. I need that part for now. Back at it again, and annoyingly, the easiest way to pull off the big swap here, I'm going to take the whole loader frame off of it again and take the front axle out from under it again. Oh well, this is fun still. So here's another reason I just found that I don't feel too bad about tearing this whole girl apart. CR block serial number. Apparently, according to Ken in Texas, who posted on the Allis Chalmers forum in November of 2009. Yeah, those are getting old yet, aren't they? According to Ken, that's a power unit engine, so it didn't even belong on a tractor to begin with. So, I got a little problem here. This one's been lurking with the B, actually. The hole here has been stripped out once before. Somebody actually put 9/16 hardware. You know, they drilled and tapped it out, I guess, for 9/16. And Well, that's loose now too, even. So I'm kind of hoping there's enough meat in there. So I think what I'm going to do is make my own 5/8 11 insert out of bolt. I'm sure that's going to be, grade 5 will be fun to drill and tap, but you know, I guess I'll make an insert. I might actually, if I have a half 20 die to match that stud, if I have a half 20 die, I might just drill and tap this hole out 5/8 11 and then make myself a custom stud. Think about it. I just now found it. I haven't even put it in the drill yet. It's the tap drill for 5/8 11. So I'm just gonna kind of clean it up, and I'm not going 3/4. No, there's not enough room there. So yeah, I'm just gonna clean those threads out and hope for the best. All right, we're making progress again. Show off my highly advanced keyway cutting capabilities here. I mean, it actually does work pretty well. I could probably even use the auto feed if I wanted to. I'm a little scared for that though. I braved up. I am using the auto feed. Look at that, like a machine made it or something. Pretty good for not at all having the right machine to do that. I mean, if you ignore that giant burr. Now some highly advanced internal keyway cutting. These things are actually pretty friggin' cool. I really do love these rotary keyway cutters. I mean, they're pretty cool. Ignore my awful surface finish from the, you know, the parting tool. But man, look at that keyway. And here's all that little mechanism is. It's just two little nubs sticking out of a shaft, pushing that cutter along one tooth at a time. And it makes the, you know, cutting edge do the thing. I think that ought to do it. Yep, kind of think I should have left that shaft maybe like an inch longer. I might cut the keyway a little farther. We'll see. I'm gonna look at how everything stacks up again. I didn't really measure, but that ought to work. Got my intermediate shaft in now for the crank start and for, you know, driving the hydraulic pump. So I've got a, I might end up having to put a spacer under that radiator mount, but, and I need to still bolt all of this down, well, tighten it down. But I think that flex coupling ought to work for me. I might have to do some adjusting to really get that thing centered and the left-right, but I don't know how forgiving that's going to be either. I guess really as long as it's not winging this shaft around and hitting the pedestal there, which it's not touching. We'll see if it stays that way. I guess as long as it's not super off balance, it shouldn't really matter. So we'll find out. So like I said, the hydraulic pump is going to drive off of this, the crank start pulley here. It's going to go somewhere about here. It should be pretty easy to bracket up since I've got, you know, this landscape already. This is 2-inch angle iron, and this is like 1 3/4 or 1 7/8. It was some weird, the local steel place had a whole pallet of it that they were selling for half price because somebody ordered it and didn't end up buying it. So you know, it's useful for stuff like this. So one thing I got going here is this pump. I think I need the opposite of, you can see I've already got it taken apart and I've already figured this out. I need the opposite rotation direction as for what it wants. See, it's labeled here, but you can also figure out on a gear pump. It is labeled, the interesting thing here, it's labeled as a pump or a motor, which tells me that it should be able to tolerate the change in load direction, because to be a motor versus to be a pump is it's the opposite loading condition, right? So here's, if you've never seen inside of one of these things here, what happens is, actually I'm going to stick the other gear back in just to help illustrate things. I'm sure that seal loves that shaft. It's good and rusty. Try not to set that on that gasket. So what happens here is when you spin this pump, those gears spin, of course, the opposite direction, and the change in volume here is what creates the pumping action. We are not squeezing oil between the gears, right? When I spin this pump, say when I spin it counterclockwise like that, we are not squishing oil between these gear teeth and pumping it to over here. That's not how that works. When I spin this pump this direction, it's going to pull the oil from this side and push it this direction. Why that is we're changing the volume inside this cavity by sweeping it through between these gear teeth, between the housing here, and pulling it along through, where it's, yeah, that's a lot of gap. Oh yeah, it's got the wiper edges there. That's pretty smart. But pulls it across there and pushes it out that way. And that is actually the direction this pump is supposed to be used. The big way that you can see that is that this right here, huge port, that's the inlet port for a pump, or the outlet port as a motor, because it's going to be the lowest pressure. Pressure is resistance to flow, right? You want, if you're trying to pull oil into a pump, you want the least restriction so that you can have the least cavitation damage, right? If you're pulling a vacuum on oil, you're going to end up pulling vapor into that oil, and you're going to end up collapsing that vapor and cavitating, so on and so forth. But what that's going to mean for loading our pump is most of this assembly is actually going to be under the high pressure, the hydraulic pressure, at all times, because we're only sweeping across that little sealing surface right there. So that means the rest of this must be under pressure, which is kind of neat. But it's got to be the way this is. Either way I put these gears in, of course, changes the direction of the rotation of the pump. So I want, because this motor rotates this way, right, runs clockwise, if I spin this pump clockwise like this, that is not set up correctly. We're pulling from the small port and pushing toward the big port. Now if I was trying to run this as a motor according to that cover, this cover, that's the way that's supposed to be, but that's not what we're doing today. So all I've got to do is pop this gear set out, switch places. Now when I spin clockwise, we are correctly pulling the oil from the big port, pushing it to the small port. So now all I have to do is make sure these pins are in the right place, right? Because there's these dowel pins here that help the alignment of that cover. And then just plop it back on. Now before I go to the trouble to mount up the pump the way it's configured now, before I go to the trouble to mount it up, make sure it works. Do a little function test, because if it doesn't work, I may just come up with a different solution entirely, or if it needs rebuilt really desperately. I mean, I was in there, none of the wear surfaces looked like they had any real problems, but We're going to find out the empirical way right now. It seems 500-ish. I see some activity in the hoses. I think it's at least trying to suck some up. I'll have to fiddle with it and get back to you. All right, unfortunately it is not reversible. The inlet side here has this drilling through this kind of bearing sealing plate that I didn't recognize before, but it connects here to this seal. It's kind of a good thing it didn't build pressure, because that would have been on the because I can't, unless there's nothing, it's not machine symmetrical, so yeah, it would have put hydraulic pressure on that bearing, on that seal plate, and that would have not worked. So yeah, I've got to spin it around, spin the whole, I think that'll work. I think I've got room in there. All right, I've made this bracket here to hold the crank start, and it engages, turns the motor over. It's a little stiff and a little, the coupling is definitely soft, right? It moves, it wiggles a good bit, but if I can get a good angle on that. Yep. Yeah, you can see it's a little squishy, but most of the time, let's be real, it's gonna start on electric anyway. Well, apparently that's not gonna work. That'll probably do. All right, I got my little alternator mounted up here with my customized bracket. Kind of had to make there to tag the water pump. And that's all tightened up. Give it a little test start here and make sure that that belt's going to track straight enough, and go from there. Okay, I have been making some progress here. I've got, I think I already have this, the gas tank mounted, but I got the seat mounted now. It's bracket made, and I've got started on the clutch pedal mechanism. So that's gonna be that guy there going across the front of the seat bracket. Then the clutch pedal is gonna stick out right about where this PTO lever is. A little bit outside it. So it's gonna be a little goofy in that area. Right around there, but it'll be all right. I'll show you here when I get the pedal cut out. But I've got the PTO unit mounted. Partially mounted. I got the Permatex dried. Now it's time to put the rest of the bolts in and tighten them down. I'm going to replace the top couple of those with studs, and do a couple studs on this little seal housing down here, so that I've got somewhere to mount my steering. That's going to be kind of a neat little setup, because I've kind of painted myself into a corner again, and I'm going to have to do full hydro steering, because there is just kind of nowhere to mount a steering box, and then the linkages are going to be terrible getting all the way to the front. So I've already ordered an orbital valve and some fittings. Now I just need to order a cylinder. I need to measure for a cylinder, see how far my little Pitman arm unit sweeps each way, and order the appropriate cylinder for heavy. But yeah, you see what's going on. Got my hydraulic pump mount almost made. Got slots milled so that I have some adjustability to make that belt taut, and should be good to go on the full hydraulics. So yeah, I think I'm getting pretty close to a test drive. Steering, clutch, brakes, I gotta do brakes still. and then I'll be ready for a test drive. Then I've just got to design and procure and weld up a bucket. Like I've been saying all along, big part of this is make it like the old timers would have. And this, what used to be an old cultivator, is going to become my clutch pedal. All right, I got the hydraulic tank all mounted, plumbed up. All that should be pretty good. I've got the pump mounted. I need to fit I think a 45 onto that, maybe a street 90, and run that along the frame rail. It's going to go into the steering orbital valve, which isn't here yet, and it needs to be mounted. That's going to go on that plate that's on the PTO unit. I've got the throttle in. That's kind of nice. And I've got my new hydraulic valve. I need to mount that. I think I'm going to mount this guy something sort of like this-ish, if I can. Sorry, like this-ish. Sort of like ER, if I can. But I don't want to get too close to the seat, and, bracket try and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to see, I've got the old hydraulic valve. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make the bracket that it came with. Let's see what kind of mounting options I have for that. Well, none of the holes line up, or slots, or whatever you want to call them. They come close, you get one lined up, right? But I just can't, it just doesn't work. So finally an excuse to use this transfer punch that... Okay, so for the steering cylinder, all I've really done here is I actuated my front axle from one lock to the other, and then selected, I think this is a 1.5-inch bore cylinder that has the same stroke length as my, displacement of this tie rod. So all I think I need to do is, I've made these tabs here that I think I just need to, just like that. All right, first time starting it with the hydraulic pump hooked up and oil in it, and this is gonna be the first time operating the steering too, I think. Big time leak, but actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I might have forgotten to, fuck yeah, of course I did. Okay, that ought to about do it for part 2 on the loader tractor here. Still got steering wheel to put in, because this is my steering right now on the 3-valve hydraulic bank. But I've got the orbital valve. I need to do some cardboard assisted design to decide how I'm gonna kind of lay that thing out so I can something like this. I sure do kind of like steering with it. It's got to have a steering wheel, but I'm also trying to rationalize, how to make it easy to get on and off of this thing with the steering wheel in the way. And I didn't think about my hydraulic pipes here when I came up with the plan. And I might, still, I guess I could even just do hoses. Probably what I'll do. It'll be a little pricier, but I want to cut this out and have somewhere to kind of step through here instead of having to step over. But other than that, well, and a bunch of other work, I don't want to discount that's a crap load of work that I have to do, such as freeing up that cylinder, getting it repaired. I've got the belt slips on the hydraulic pump at like 800 psi. It should be like 2,000. So I've got to change that over to chain drive. I have all the parts for that. Still need to do brakes. Still a lot of finishing work to do. And then I've got to blast it all apart and paint it. So stick around. It hopefully probably won't be another 2 months, 3 months. It's probably been 3 months since the last update. I'll try to make the next one not quarterly, but we will see. Until next time.